is sponsored by spreadsheets because they are making my life so much easier. Hello my lovely friends, it's Margaret and it is time for my June wrap-up. I kind of went into my June reading with a loose plan. I wasn't actually I didn't have any hardcore reading goals like I do in July, so we're here with me having completely thrown that plan out the window. But you know what? I still read some books. Could be worse. I could have read no books. But I did read 5 books in June. 3 of those were mysteries, 1 was a fantasy, and 1 was a contemporary. I had 1 5-star book, 2 4-star books, 1 3-star book, and 1 2-star book. I also ended up reading 1 middle grade and 4 young adult books. And I read 2 physical books, 3 audiobooks, and 0 graphic novels. I did also DNF 1 book this month, and we will talk about that in a minute. As usual, I'm going to tackle this in the format that I read the book, and we will start with the audiobooks. The first audiobook that I finished in June was Jane Unlimited by Kristen Kishore. This is about Jane. She makes umbrellas, and her aunt has just recently died, and so when she gets invited by an old friend to their family's great giant mansion, she accepts the invitation because she promised her aunt that if she was ever invited to that mansion, she would go. She gets invited to this mansion for a gala, and there's a whole bunch of weird family politics going on, and there's some missing art, and there's some shady stuff happening with some children that are on the grounds, and it just follows Jane as she decides which particular mystery to follow. It was weird. I ended up giving this a 2-star rating. It was not my favorite book. It was an interesting concept, and I think there are people who would really enjoy this book, especially if you are plot driven and you don't need to be attached particularly to the characters. I didn't feel satisfied with this story. I only finished it because I wanted to know what the heck was going on with this weird house, but if there had not been that initial mystery element, there wasn't enough engagement with the characters to keep me reading and keep me going. The premise was interesting. It had me going at the beginning. I was really interested in this particular mystery that was going on, and then it just ended up being way too many mysteries for me to handle in one book. But I do think that if you like mystery elements, if you like kind of a little bit of a weird sci-fi element, if you like the kind of exploring multiverses, I think this is a good book for you. If you like interesting, complicated, convoluted plots and don't necessarily need to follow one character from beginning to end or a set of characters from beginning to end, this would be a good book for you. It just was not particularly the book for me. Sadly, I am very sad. I really wanted to like this book. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. The second audiobook that I finished in June was the one that I DNF'd, and that was Black Tudors by Miranda Kaufman. For those of you that don't know, there are actual instances of Black people being in England who were brought to England, some of them not as slaves, and a lot earlier than when the transatlantic slave trade started. I know there is some evidence of Africans from around the Roman times, but this was specifically talking about different people who were mentioned in the Tudor era. I thought it was an interesting concept, but because there is so very little information about the Black people, because they weren't in prominent positions. Like the first one we talk about, the one that's on the cover, he was a trumpeter for Henry VIII. They're in the ledgers, they are in some of the historical records of the newspapers, they're in marriage records and death records and all kinds of stuff like that. And so it ended up being a lot more about the white people that they would have worked for or been around, and a lot of extrapolation, and it just wasn't what I wanted at the time. I wanted something that was definitely totally focused on the Black people who lived in that era, and unfortunately there just wasn't, I guess, enough information. Also, I don't think this also was not a good book for an audiobook because there was just so much information and I kept getting lost and kept losing myself and having to backtrack, and that was getting frustrating. I may eventually revisit this book at a later date. So I may eventually revisit this book at a later date when I have time to sit down and actually read it and take notes and pay attention to what was going on. I am going to talk about the next 2 books that I listened to in one go because they are part of the same series, and that is Truly Devious and The Vanishing Stair by Maureen Johnson. I have read one other book by Maureen Johnson, that is The Name of the Star, and I really enjoyed it. I really liked the mystery element of it. Apparently we just need to add Murder at Boarding School to my brand because so far I've just really enjoyed all of the Murder at Boarding School books that I have read, at least this year. Truly Devious is about Stevie Bell. She is obsessed with this murder case that happened at this place called Ellingham Academy. Ellingham Academy is this really prestigious school in Vermont. It's up in the mountains where no one can really get to it. The students are really able to pursue their academic passion. And you just really pick a field of study, and the way you get in is you have a very passionate case for whatever it is. Like, one of her friends is an engineer, one of her friends has published a 700-page novel at the age of 16, which sounds questionable, but as we went into the novel, I actually started to be like, yeah, I think this could actually have written a 700-page novel that was good. Stevie is obsessed with this murder that happened in the 1930s, where the man who started the academy, Albert Ellingham, his wife and daughter go missing. There's this ransom note signed by this person called truly Devious, and it's this big mystery. What happened to his wife and daughter? What happened to all the money that he used to try and get them back? So Stevie writes a letter to this school saying she wants to study there, and she just basically lays out all of the evidence and information that she has gathered about this case. This was such a good book. I'm not sure how I feel about the romance, but this is one of those few books where, like, I'm okay with either way that it could go. I'm not entirely sure who the true, I know who it seems like the love interest is. There is kind of, like, he's okay, but there's another one that I'm rooting for. We're just gonna put that out there. She is so fully fleshed out. She's like a real person. She does have anxiety, and the anxiety, like, there are places where her anxiety is exactly how I feel around friends and people. There's a part in this book that I just felt so seen by, because she was sitting there going, it's okay that this person is not talking to me. They are still my friend, even though they're not talking to me and they're hanging out with someone else. And, like, the number of times Margaret has had to talk herself down from that hill, it was one of those moments where I was just like, I feel seen. Someone out there gets it. From what I understand, from the research I've done and talking with other people, this is pretty accurate anxiety rep. I did like the fact that the way it tackles anxiety is it also tackles it with coping mechanisms. And, like, through the course of the story, you are inadvertently learning not only how to cope with anxiety yourself if you ever have issues with it, but how to help other people. I really appreciated that, because I don't think that that's something that we talk about enough. I don't think that's something that we get prepared for a lot of the time, to help other people who might have a condition that we don't have. And I think that is something that should be talked about more. Not just with anxiety, but with a lot of other things. One of the things I loved about this is that all of the characters are so well, like, they're just so well drawn in the, like, the fictional sense. Like, they all have personalities of their own. You can see them, like, being other places when they are not with the main character. Like, it just like, you could see them living and breathing and actually being people in this book. My favorite character is Nate, obviously, because he is the writer, and I love him so much. I really do. But Stevie is absolutely fantastic as well. And she's just so, like, kick butt, because, like, she doesn't let, like, she has to deal with the anxiety, but she doesn't let it stop her from doing what she wants to do. Sometimes it gets in the way, but most of the time she's got it figured out and she's able to handle it. And I love that she goes after what she wants and figures out ways to do that while still dealing with the issues that she has. I will tell you that if you are reading this book, you want this book to pick up, because it does not wrap up just about anything in this book. Some things do get wrapped up in this book, but also, like, she wraps certain things up and then she adds more layers to the problem. And I don't think I have a feeling that we as people, that, like, we as readers are not quite aware of, like, I have suspicions of things that have happened that I can't talk about because I have no one to talk about I don't have anyone to talk about this book with, but I have a suspicion about what happens with one of the characters, actually two of the characters, that I think that it's deeper than what it seems to be at the end of this book. I gave both of these 4 stars. Now that the audiobooks are out of the way, it is time to talk about the physical books that I read, and the first one that I finished was Again But Better by Christine Riccio. And now, you've heard of this if you're on BookTube at all. You've heard of this because Christine is a big booktuber. I think just about all of us at this point do or have followed Christine at some point. This is about Shane, and she's been doing college all wrong. And so in the spring of, like, her junior year, I think, she decides that she is going to do a study abroad program in London, and she's going to do everything again, but better. She's actually going to make friends this time. She's going to find herself a boyfriend, etc., etc., etc. Only problem is, Shane is a med student, and she's doing a creative writing track in London. She has lied to her parents about the track that she is doing in London. I really did enjoy this. I did not so much read this book as I was read by this book. There were places it was not a comfortable experience, because especially in the first half, Shane and I, again, have very similar insecurities when it comes to friends and talking to people and boys. There are definitely a couple of places where I literally took my pen, because obviously I tabbed this one up. There are places where I literally took my pen and like wrote, I am in this picture and I don't like it, because that's how I felt about it. But, however, all in all, I thought it was good. I really enjoyed it. I gave it a solid 3 stars. I know that some people have issues with certain plot points. I don't have an issue with them. In the particular situation that they were in, I don't really have an issue with them. I really don't. I just don't. I think what it comes down to is sometimes people will settle for the wrong person and stay with the wrong person, and it takes meeting the right person to realize you are with the wrong person. And I felt like this was done in the best, like, things that happened in here were done in the best way that could, not necessarily the best way that could have happened. Mistakes were made. But, like, I don't have an issue with how the situation played out or how it went, but I did enjoy it. I do think it was a solid book. It's not the best book I've ever read, but, like, very few books are the best book I've ever read. It also was not even close to the worst book I've ever read. I really enjoyed Shane as a character. I enjoyed the way that she, like, I enjoyed the things she played with. There's only one thing that I really, truly had an issue with, and that is the fact that her parents are a mess, and, like, it's never actually named, but her parents are definitely abusive. And I wish that had been named and explored a little more. So if you are not comfortable reading about controlling parents, just go into this with caution. And the final book that I finished in June, I should have finished in May, but I kind of got derailed, and then it's been a mess, okay? It's just, I'm getting caught up, but that is The Son of Neptune by Rick Riordan. This is quite possibly the most frustrating book on the planet, or it was when it first came out. I still remember finishing this freaking book, but also look at this cover. I can still remember the feeling deep inside of me when this came out and I realized who this was. I love him so much. Look at my son. Look at him. Look at him. Look at the disaster that he has caused. I love him so much. Having reread this book, I absolutely adore it. The number of times my favorite character is mentioned really makes up for the fact that you don't see her at all. It really does, because literally, I mean literally, look at this. I don't know if you can see all of the purple tabs, but every purple tab is every time Annabeth is mentioned. Because I needed to keep track of those this time around. I love this book so much. I can't tell you what it's about, but I can tell you what the Heroes of Olympus is about. Basically, it's after the Percy Jackson series. Everything was fine, and then it wasn't. And so a new set of heroes has been recruited because Percy has gone missing in the first book. I'm not spoiling anything. He obviously is found because he's on the cover of this book. Also, Son of Neptune. So we're really not spoiling anything, and this review is a disaster, but I don't care. I just don't care. I love this book so much. I love this series. This is my favorite series of all time. And I know some people don't like the style of writing, but I love the fact that Rick Riordan decides to kind of shake things up, and that he is able to cover 3 different perspectives and make each of them feel, at least for me, distinct. Like, you could pick out random places, read stuff without names, and I would probably know who it was that you were reading from, especially if it was Percy. Now, I will say that this series does not have quite as much character in the narration as the Percy Jackson series does, because Percy Jackson series was first person and this is third person. So we do have a level of removal from the characters, but it's still there. Persassy is still there and going strong. We might discover a new camp in this book. We get to meet a whole host of new characters. I really do love the 2 new characters that we have in this, Frank and Hazel. They are adorable. They are wonderful. I would die for them. If my rambling is any indication, I gave this 5 stars. I love it. If you have not read this series, what are you doing with your life? If you haven't read any of the Percy Jackson books, what are you doing with your life? Those are all of the books I read in June. Let me know down below if you have read any of these or something that you read in June that you have feelings about. Positive, negative, doesn't really matter. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, if you enjoy videos about books and writing, you can hit that subscribe button. I make videos 2 to 3 times a week, and I would love to see you here on a regular basis. All my social media will be linked down below. That is it for now, my friends. I will see you later when we will talk about more wordy, nerdy things. Bye! Hello, my lovely friends. It's Margaret, and today, I don't know what I'm saying. It's mine. My nose itches. Like, oh! That's all I have. Guys, I just get emotional about Percy Jackson, okay? I already said that.